Welcome back to the program. My guest today is no stranger to investigations and looking into violent crimes. He was a special prosecutor and consultant during the Hillside Strangler trials in Los Angeles. He ran the Homicide Bureau as the assistant DA in New York. He served as Deputy Chief Counsel for the Congressional Committee investigating the assassinations of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and, of course, President JFK. His new book, he's the author of 33 of them, but his new one is called That Day in Dallas, Lee Harvey Oswald Did Not Kill JFK. Please welcome Robert Tannenbaum to the program. Robert, how are you doing today?
Fine. Good to be with you.
Good. So we're going to discuss a lot of different things. The first thing that I want to start with, though, is, of course, after all these years, right, 62 plus years, we sort of got the details, but not really, right? President Trump dropped these 80,000 details in these JFK files. Let me get your thoughts first and foremost on what you thought of these new documents, and do you think that they change the narrative in any direction?
No, not at all. As a matter of fact, that when Trump's for presidency, he said he would release them and he didn't do it. And he's told people, if you saw what I saw, you would not release them either. We want to see what he saw. That's the whole point of all this. American people, if Trump can handle it as Mr. President, we can handle it on this show and everywhere in the kitchens of America. So he didn't do it. And finally, the 80,000 pages, the alleged 80,000 pages, would it offend common sense if I suggested to you that the CIA and people like the CIA in this case, and I'll get to the evidence about them, had 62 years to continue to lie to the American public about what happened. Their theory about 3 shots from the back, one that hit one or two that hit, according to them, 1 or 2 hit Kennedy in the back and in the head, in the back of the head. What had it been, of course, his head, which we'll get to with the 4th shot, president's head spins backwards and to the left. Well, if you're shot in the back of the head, how in God's name does your head move backwards? So in any event, without that happening, I don't believe there was, from everyone who was reported back to me, a lot of people who were very much involved in all this have seen nothing new. As a matter of fact, some of the people in Washington saw a photo of someone who looked like JFK, who looked like Oswald, by the way. We knew from our investigation that there was a dummy Oswald walking around out there.
Yeah, doppelgangers.
So all of a sudden, this is not something to chase down. You know, I found a photo of such nonsense. So I don't think that, given the notion of washing this down and also changing testimonies, that they had an opportunity to do with people who actually testified, who said A and B, but they now say X and Y kind of situation. There's no deceit that's too large for the CIA to have played in this case. And one of the reasons I mention that to you is, when I first went to Washington, Senator Schweiker, Richard Schweiker from Pennsylvania, was the subcommittee chair of the Church Committee, Senator Church's committee, and he was focusing on the executive committee's responses to the assassinations of Martin Luther King and President Kennedy. And he asked me to come to his office the very first week I was in Washington, pursuant to the House Select Committee on Assassinations, which was the committee I was in charge of. With that committee, I was in charge of the Kennedy assassination. And Richard Sprague from Philadelphia, Mr. DA, Chief Assistant DA in Philly, was really greater than his legend, if that's humanly possible. And he hired me in October of '76. And I had never met him. I only knew of him. But, you know, when you were in Manhattan, and I was then head of the Homicide Bureau and running the criminal, and the Bureau Chief of the Criminal Courts, we were concerned about everyday quality type dispositions that we had to get in order to continue to feed this giant. And there were certain cases I had marked no less a plea because they were so heinous, there could be no plea bargain on them unless the defendant wanted to plead to the top and count the indictment. But all of this said, Schweiker said to me, "Here is my file. I'm going to tell you right now," he said, "out of the cold. I just came in from the DA's office for 10 years in Manhattan with the legendary DA Frank Hogan." And he said, "I hate to tell you this, but this is what I believe, that you will be obstructed every step of the way by the CIA. And I believe that the CIA participated in the assassination based upon the investigation we just conducted."
Mhm.
Now, it was somewhat of a shock. It's still a shock for me when I talk about it because it's such an outrageous thing to come to a conclusion on when you're an honest person who's looking at the evidence. Schweiker's not some bomb-throwing character wandering around. This was a very serious, conservative person at the time who was seriously taking up this problem of what happened assuming we could find it out. When Sprague asked me to go to Washington in October of '76, as I mentioned, we would start the select committee on January 1st, and the select committee goes on for 2 years, period. Funding ends. So we started out with getting commitments from the members of the committee, the Congressional Committee, that if they interfered with this investigation, from our point of view, we were leaving. And they
Shouldn't be able to
promised,
prosecute them, right? I mean, isn't that obstruction of interference of an investigation?
well, the investigation is their investigation. It wasn't mine or Sprague's. We
Mhm.
were working for the Congress at the time,
Right, right.
and they promised
So all
us,
you could do really is,
they would,
yeah, all you could really do
you know,
is
they
just kind
promised
of,
us they would,
recommend certain things.
yeah,
Let me
well,
ask you
they
this.
promised us they
Let me ask
promised
you
us they
this.
wouldn't interfere.
As far as the documents that have been released, what do you think in everything that you've seen? You've been part of these select committees on these assassinations and all these different things. What do you think that they're still holding? In other words, is there 1,500? Is there 2,000? Is there 4,000? Is there 10,000? How many more documents do you think that they are holding?
Whatever they're holding has to do what Schweiker told me about the CIA's involvement in this case. That was his opinion. From our opinion, that is Sprague and mine, doing the investigation we did, and we did not go down there with a brief that we were coming up with anything new or different. We just got a commitment from the committee. Whatever we found out, and if it was the silly, absurd single bullet theory, contrary to science and common sense, then we would have said that.
Right, right.
But what happened was the evidence is so overwhelming that Oswald didn't kill the president. They
Yeah, I
then,
mean, I think anyone that is paying attention to this and clearly can see that the CIA absolutely did it. I mean, look, if you look at the fact that there was no powder burns on Lee Harvey Oswald, he didn't have any chemical burns from the gun. They said that the gun that they said that he used actually wasn't the right gun because he didn't have that gun. What about Ruth Paine and Michael Paine? Michael Paine looks a heck of a lot like Lee Harvey Oswald. Ruth Paine is still alive. What is she, 95 years old? Something like that.
yeah.
Why aren't they dragging her in and doing a deposition on this woman?
Well, who's going to do that? The president right now, well, in my opinion, let me back up for one moment. The only person who could change what has been going on is the chief executive of our country, Article 2. There's no one else that can do this, order it, and oversee it.
Mhm.
And not to say to people, hey, you know what? If you saw what I saw, you wouldn't want it. Well, here's the rub on that. If he felt that way in his first term, what changed his mind now? Those are the things we need to know. But we're stymied again to guess. So when you ask me, what do I think of the 80,000? I don't think anything of it. I know that given what we know from the investigation, the objective facts here, totally objective, immutable facts I'm talking about. They can't change. They in no way can be refuted. That what it tells us is that the CIA participated in their own words in the assassination. And I don't know if you're familiar with the letter that was written by John McCone, who was the CIA director, who Kennedy appointed after he fired Allen Dulles in '91 in 30 when he at the Bay of Pigs, and so Dulles gets fired, and he's head of the CIA, and who comes in but our friend John McCone, who was a very strong Kennedy person, And he responded to a James Rowley, who was head of the Secret Service, response to leaks that were coming out that Oswald was an agent of the FBI and the CIA. And indeed he was, starting in 57. He was that kind of an agent at Sugi Air Force Base, monitoring U-2 flights. And Gary Powell's U-2 plane got shot down. And they lied to President Eisenhower. And that's why I goes through, a man who lived his entire life in the military. Beware of the military. That's this complex. You cannot be trusted, and it is very, very, very dangerous to our democracy. The other part of that letter that he wrote was, I'll summarize it for you. He said it's in two parts. There's 3 pages. The third page is a signature page, and the second page has the major article in it that I want to mention to you. But in the first page of the letter, he's talking about leaks that are coming out about Oswald being an agent, and his training, and the super suspect activity that he was in. And then
we know he was a patsy. I mean, anyone can see that. Stevie Wonder could see that. Not to mention he said he was.
With respect to what John McCone, the CIA director, said in March 3rd of '64. He said that he was very nervous, and if any of this material was erroneously picked up by the media, and they could say that this agency and others were perhaps directly involved in the Dallas action, as he referred to the assassination. And then he goes on to say, while the persons involved in the assassination were in the employ of the CIA, this agency, total admission.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, well, if that's the case, then we have to maintain the position that it's impossible to maintain full 24-hour responsibility over our operatives. As if this was like, some rogue operation. Some people got together, perhaps, and decided they were going to kill the president. I myself asked then to the chair of our committee, and I asked him, Lou Stokes, who is from Cleveland, Ohio. I said to Lou, I have 2 subpoenas here. We have information that the CIA was involved in the assassination. These are documents that we believe they have that explains if the CIA did it as a unit, as an agency, or it was a rogue operation. Individuals within the agency decided to kill the president. He said, Bob, it's over for you. I said, what's over for me? And he said, the committee does not want to go forward with what you're asking for. I said, my God, why'd you hire me? I told you not to hire me because I would never compromise on search for truth. And you need to compromise in a Congress. You can't have, 315, whatever the number happens to be at the time, executive types. So he said, I know you did a lot of work. It's amazing. But they didn't think, the majority of the committee didn't think you would get to the bottom line of this mess.
You see, here's the thing. I think
I leaned forward and he said to me, one second. I leaned forward when he said to me, what are you going to do now? And I looked at him, just as I'm looking at you right now. I said, I resign effective right now, period. I said, I'm going to speak to Sprague right away. And I told Dick what happened. And
yeah, gotcha.
He
so here,
with me. And
hang on one second. So I think that the reason that they're holding back a lot of these documents is they don't think that the American people can handle the fact that A, they've been lied to for over 62 years, and B, the fact that LBJ killed JFK with the help of the CIA. I don't think the American people can handle that, or at least that's what the people that are holding on to these documents think. We know about the whole thing with Clifton Carter. We know about the Estes tapes. We know about Mac Wallace and all that. So there had to have been multiple shooters, right? We know that for a fact. Now Anna Luna, the congresswoman from Florida, says that NBC has a tape that they are trying to get released that shows Oswald right next to the motorcade.
Don't be confused by that, because there's a double Oswald in this thing that the CIA planted.
Right,
We
exactly.
ran that through. We knew about that photo. It's a phony photo.
Maybe it was Michael Payne that shot, along with Mac Wallace. I mean, I think it was multiple people that shot him.
Oh, absolutely.
I too. Absolutely. There's no way it was Oswald. He walked through the Dallas Police Department and said, I'm a patsy. I mean, he said it himself, and the next thing you know, Jack blows him away to cover it all up. So It's an unbelievable thing that after all of these years, we still cannot get a straight answer. I mean, we know the CIA was involved, right? We could obviously all say that we know for a fact. But who in the CIA? Who ordered it? Was it Dulles being hurt and bothered because of his relationship or non-relationship, shall we say, with JFK? You know, they were at odds. I mean, it could have been a number of different things. Was it the speech? I'm going to break you into 1,000 little pieces. I mean, there's so many different moving parts. But who then told in the CIA the one lady to lie, who admitted in the testimony that she lied on some of the forms? You know what I mean? In Dallas. So I mean, there's so many moving parts here. Roger Stone, who endorsed my book, Preserving Liberty, and he wrote the book, you know, that Who Killed JFK, and he's got a picture of LBJ on the cover. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that LBJ had major influence in this assassination?
I can only answer that based upon the evidence that we found in the case, and there was a major lack of evidence with respect to that. So I can't sit here and say, yeah, I might do, I Bob Tannenbaum do. I will tell you this, in my book, That Day in Dallas, Oswald didn't kill the president. All of the facts, as if I were trying this case, is the way I presented my book. And the reason for it was, having tried scores and scores of major murder cases when I ran the Homicide Bureau in the Manhattan DA's office for a 10-year period, I was in the office. I can tell you that the work product done with respect to that is the way I presented the book. That is to say, I indict basically in the book those who lied to the American people for 62 years. And I try to exonerate the individuals who spoke truth to power, who were wrongfully accused. And that's what we're with. I mean, this to me is the most important case in criminal justice in the history of our country. We know who killed Lincoln. We don't know who killed JFK in broad daylight at 12:30 at Dealey Plaza. Mm-hmm. And that to me is like being accepted. It's like people at dinner, you know, saying, "Oh yeah, we have here a confession from John McCone, head of the CIA, that the CIA people murdered the president." Pass the potatoes, will you? What were we talking about here? We're talking about a major coup d'état.
Yeah. And here's another thing. You know, President Trump comes back into office, and yes, he talks about the JFK files. He talks about MLK. He talks about the Epstein files. He talks about all these different files. But wouldn't you want to know on day one who the hell tried to shoot you and kill you on July 13th in Butler, Pennsylvania? Why isn't that your number one priority? Forget JFK and all that from 62 years ago. Yeah, it's important. Let's get to it later. Why not find out who the hell tried to kill you in Butler, PA? We know that Crooks was another patsy, and we know that the other guy at the golf course was, you know, part of the whole Ukrainian thing. So I think we ought to really kind of concentrate more on that. What are your thoughts on that one?
Well, that to me is another really an outrage. How do we have Secret Service people allegedly have different channels? You're 50 yards away from a shooter on the top of a building with a high-powered rifle. You can't communicate with me, hypothetically, because I'm on the ground near the president. How childish is that? It's not the first time it's happened with respect to these major events. But you're absolutely right. Let's start with that. Start with the fundamentals. What do you mean you couldn't report what you saw? You had to wait a period of time. What, are you going to knock him on the shoulder and say, "Excuse me, but are you an assassin? Well, can I kill you now?"
Yeah. What are you doing with that rangefinder?
It's a total insult to our intelligence.
Yeah. What are you doing with the rangefinder? Oh, nothing. You know, how did that ladder get here? Oh, I don't know. A van dropped it off. I mean, look, it's so ridiculous that it's almost comical. And I think it points to one person in particular. I don't want to say that right now. Maybe I'll tell you off the air. But let's just say that the Secret Service director was very close with the person who was in charge of all the scheduling. I believe that they picked this wooded area in Butler, Pennsylvania, this rural area, to hide a little bit easier. And quite frankly, I think that the person that is in charge of all of the Secret Service detail, as well as the scheduling for all the candidates, knew what was going on. And the bottom line is they let him take the shot. That's all you have to know. They could have stopped him. They let him take the shot. So that kid was going to die regardless that day. And then they can say, oh, well, you know, it was a lone gunman and he tried to shoot him. And meanwhile, the body's gone. There's no autopsy, right? It's burned. It's incriminated. You know, they disintegrated, all of that stuff. Then they wiped down the entire house, his phones. I mean, that's where I want to know. I want to know that. I want to know what's going on in that case. I mean, you would think that the JFK files would be an afterthought at this point. And who's alive? Ruth? I mean, anyone else is alive? I don't think so. I think she might be the only one. And so all these people are already dead, buried, gone. Let it out already. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, half the people are going to go, that was nice. Let me get back to my phone, right? That's the mentality. So I think people would be much more interested in knowing exactly what happened, with President Trump and Butler. And remember, before he could pick his VP, JD Vance, is when they tried to take him out. Meaning what? If they didn't get it, if they were successful, thank God they were not, JD Vance would not have been picked. The entire MAGA movement would have went into turmoil without a new leader, and it would have been a disaster. So thank God he turned his head on that one. One last question for you. There's supposed to be some Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. documents coming out, and they're supposed to release those soon. You were also part of the Congressional Committee on that assassination.
No,
what are your thoughts there? What do you think we're going to see?
Let me stop you right there for a second. I was in charge of the subcommittee totally responsible for the investigation into the assassination of President Kennedy. There was another subcommittee dealing with Martin Luther King, and I did not get involved in that investigation.
Oh, okay. I apologize. I thought that was part of your bio here. So yeah, we have all of these state secrets. We know the CIA is dirty. They do their color revolutions. They take out leaders. I mean, look how many times they tried to kill Castro, right? What was it, 400 or 500 times, whatever it may have been. I hope we can get to the bottom of this. You would think if there's one president that you would think would be the one that would release it all, it would be this guy, right?
Except for one fact. When he was in his first term, he said, I'm not going to repeat it necessarily, that if you saw what I saw, you wouldn't turn it over routine. Well, what did you see? That's right. The point. That is the whole point. And if anything, what changed his mind now is that they've been so washed and cleaned that no one's going to see what he allegedly saw. And
maybe they don't even exist. Maybe they've been destroyed.
Well, people close to him said, what did you see? Can't tell you that. What is going on with respect to this entire case? And, there's like a major problem that happened that I'll mention very quickly for you. In December of '63, the Secret Service and the FBI found that Connally and Kennedy were struck with separate bullets, and they were struck at a distance of 1.9 seconds apart. The problem with that was the Manico Calcano, you can't get those shots off because of the manual bolt action necessary to fire successive shots, takes 2.3 seconds. There goes the murder weapon right out the window. So
right out the window.
Do? They ordered this youngest staff attorney named Arlen Specter, who becomes the DA of Philly, and then he becomes a state senator, United States Senator from Pennsylvania. And he's ordered to come up with the single bullet theory. And this happens in 64. So bottom line to this whole thing is that the government then never stopped lying. And that is to say, they came up with science, they said, the neutron activation analysis, N as in Nancy, AA. And that was the principal testing component for comparative bullet lead analysis. Like, can you match a fragment to a fragment or a fragment to a bullet? The answer is you can't do it. NAA said you can do it. So the CIA went around saying, if you don't believe us, well, you believe the world is flat because we have two bullets in this case, two missiles, two fragments large found in the limo, one bullet, the other one taken from Connally's right wrist, wherein fragments were taken that match what we called CE, Commission Exhibit 399, the so-called pristine magic bullet. That's what they argued, except here's what happened. Metallurgical PhDs from around the country went over all this. Nobody bothered to speak to them. And they said, this is an impossibility. You cannot match a fragment to a fragment or a fragment to a bullet, which is different from showing in ballistics a bullet fired from a pistol because of the infirmities created in manufacturing of that pistol. All those loops and whirls match that gun. That's different from what we're talking about here. And the FBI was so concerned because they had their agents testify, you could do that. That you can do fragment to fragment and fragment to bullet. They testified in cases under oath. The FBI then, on its own volition, had the only laboratory doing any of this stuff with NAA, neutron activation analysis. And they shut down their lab on September 1st, 05, and they forbid any agent to ever mention anything about what they were arguing in Washington. We have NAA. That's the science here, ladies and gentlemen. And they knew that it was a total lie. That's what they did when they had the opportunity to keep lying to us on this, with respect to residual matters. There's no end to it.
Yep. And who is the one that created the word conspiracy theorist? The CIA. Anyone that didn't agree with the official narrative of the Warren Commission were called what? Conspiracy theorists. Unbelievable. Wow. Well, thank you so much, Robert, for being on the program. The guest is Robert Tannenbaum. The book is That Day in Dallas. Where can folks go to find your book, sir?
Now we'll go to Amazon, and they have it listed. The book will be published on May 20th, I've been informed.
Oh, okay. So pre-orders right
Hardcovers
now.
will be coming out. And I thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. God bless you. Be well, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.